All right. Hello again, everyone. Today we're going to focus on drawing text in our game window. So if you play our current game, which right now I'm going on from the last video where we made the player and enemy sort of stay on screen. If you look at our sort of Python shell here, you may recall how we're basically printing out the lives with text over there and the score as well. So anytime the player loses a life or increases their score, we print over here to the Python shell window. And that is using basically just the standard print function built into Python. But today I want to show you how to actually draw some text on the actual window here to make it a little more immediate and clear to the players what their score and lives are. So that's what we're going to get started today. So I've done a little bit of research and playing around beforehand. And then if you go to this URL here in your web browser, I have a little page that talks about drawing text. So you can read through this in more detail. But the key thing we need to be able to use is the Pygame.Font module, which is how we can load fonts, which describe how text looks when it gets rendered. You can think of like cursive if you're familiar with that. But anyway, so we're going to need to use this module to actually load a font and draw some text. So the first thing to keep in mind is that if we go to Pygame.Font, you can create a font using actually this font object here by specifying a file name. So if we have a font file on our computer, you may often see them with an extension .ttf, but there are others. We can provide that file name and load whatever kind of custom font we want. But for simplicity for now, we're going to actually use what's the default font that's basically sort of built into Pygame. And so that's what we're going to do first, is we're going to get the default font and then basically create one of these font objects by specifying a file name and a size, which is basically going to be sort of the height of our text. So let's get started. I'm going to save this as a new file. Score and lives on screen. So what do we need to do? Well, we only really need to load our font once early on in our game, so I'm basically just going to do it kind of up here after we create our game screen. We need to create the font used for drawing text. So as I kind of mentioned before, and I'll sort of move this over here. First thing we're going to need to do is actually load our font. So we're going to have the font file name, which is going to be pygame.font.get default font. And then to create a font, we're going to need to create one of these font objects, which requires the font file name and also requires a height in pixels for how tall we want our rendered text or fonts to be. So I'm going to go ahead and define that there and be 16. You can change it to something else if you want. Now to make sure I haven't made any typos, I'm just going to run our program real quick and make sure it loads. Yeah, nothing crashed, so we're good there. To draw text, we're going to want to basically go to, well, so we're not going to need these print statements anymore. I'm going to go ahead and remove them since we're going to change how they're actually being drawn or printed out. So to actually draw things, we can't just replace things here. Like we couldn't just replace that print statement with, you know, font.render and then whatever parameters you wanted to pass, because what we do here is in our drawing section of the code is we fill our entire screen with a solid color. So if we drew text earlier, it would get overwritten. Now, generally speaking, we probably are going to want this text to be on top of the other thing, so I'm going to draw it last. So I'm going to do draw the player's lives and score. How do we do that? Well, if you go to pygame.font, there is this render method which describes how we actually can render some specific text to our surface. And so how do we do that? Well, actually, it'll create a surface that we can then draw on our screen. So how do we do that? Well, if we call font.render and we pass the text we want to do, provide, which in this case will be lives, and then we're going to want to pass the number of lives, which, what did we call that? Player lives. Player lives. If you'll recall, since this is a integer, a number, player lives, we have to convert it to a string by calling the stir function on it. And then we're not going to use any anti-aliasing for now, because it's a bit of an advanced topic. Anti-aliasing. So if you go search online for anti-aliasing, let's see if this works. Aliasing. So this image here on Wikipedia gives a good example of what's aliasing, so and anti-aliasing. So when you draw things on computers with all these like pixel grids that we've shown, you obviously can only draw things for like a single pixel. So it's going to look blocky depending on how you draw it. So anti-aliasing is a way to where you can make text look a little bit smoother by adding like shades of gray or things like that to your text, so it doesn't look so blocky, at least when viewed from far away. This image is pretty large, so it doesn't actually look that great when it's anti-aliased by removing these aliases. Anyway, so, and the other thing we need to do is pass a color, which we'll define in a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and choose white now, but there are reasons we might want to change that later, as I'll show. And so once we call font.render, that's going to return us a surface. And so I'm just going to go ahead and put my parameters on different lines there. So font.render returns a surface, which is one of these surface objects in Pygame. And so it's sort of rendered it to this in-memory thing on our computer, but if we actually run our program, we don't actually see that drawn on our screen. And actually I made an error here, so if you want to see it, I forgot to define this no anti-aliasing constant, which I believe needs to be false. Yeah, we want this to be true if we do want to anti-aliasing, but we don't want that, so we'll set that to false. So let's try again. So yeah, if you look here, you won't see any text rendered on our window because we've only rendered it to this sort of extra in-memory surface. Now, to actually copy it to our main screen for our game, we need to do something which is known as blitting, which Wikipedia calls it a bit blit. There's a nice article here if you really want to look in this advanced topic. But it's basically where if you have, say, one image or piece of data in your computer and you want to sort of copy it, transfer it over to some other location in your computer's memory, you basically do this BLIT, bit block transfer, which will transfer the bits, the binary data in your computer over from one place to another. That's all it really is. Now the pygame.surface object has this BLIT method, and so we can call that in order to transfer our text surface onto our main screen surface there. So how do we do that? Well, this function signature looks a little bit outdated. Oh wait, no, it's fine. So we're drawing this source surface, which is going to be our text surface, to a destination area, which is a rectangle, basically, for where we want this text surface to be drawn on our screen. So that's what we need to do there. So let's do this. We'll define the left X and top Y screen position for our lives text. It's going to be 0, 0. This is just X and Y coordinates in what's stored in what is known as a Python tuple, which is just a way to sort of have multiple items stored in like a single object. And then we just need to call the BLIT method on our screen to copy our text surface over to the lives text left X, top Y, screen position. So let's run that and see what that looks like. So now you can see we have our lives drawn in the top left corner. So that's good, and you see it changes anytime our enemy collides with our player. So now the other thing we need to do is draw our score. There are two ways we could go about this. We could basically call this code for creating the text surface and blitting it to the screen twice and pass different text here that we want to have rendered. The other option is that we could just combine the lives and score text into basically a single item of text here. So that is what I am going to probably do here for now, just for simplicity, but there are reasons why we might want to change that later. So to increase what's drawn for our screen, just need to add some text for the score, and you'll notice I put spaces here, a space here before score to separate it more from lives once it gets rendered. And then we also need to pass our score there, and since we're going to be drawing multiple items of text here, I'm going to remove lives from that to make that a little shorter. And now let's play our game and test that out. Okay, so now you see the lives and score are being drawn. So if I go and get collectible, my score goes up by 1, can go up again. If I get hit by the enemy, you saw my lives kind of decreased. And there you go. So that seems to be working reasonably well for now. And that's probably where we're going to leave off for this video. And we'll see you next time.